Rings of Power Season 2, by no surprise, falls short once again. A show that aspires to be the next Game of Thrones, but struggles to even match Season 8. And well, you know how well that went. It feels like they took what didn't work in that season and implemented it into their own work. Distance is almost impossible to tell because characters are wandering for ages and teleporting to other places. In the early part of the season, to get between the two elven locations, it was a short journey by horse, to later on being extremely tedious, even if they were to account for the bridge now being destroyed. Everyone almost unanimously can teleport to Khazad-dûm more than anywhere else in the show. Just because it's nearby does not mean it's a brisk walk. This is all while other characters are wandering through the most aimless journeys with no sense of reaching their end. Some journeys just happening for the sake of runtime, as the wizard and the half-foot were made to walk in circles until their friend joined them, telling them to then follow the stars. I've just got a better idea. Walk in a straight line, deviate very little, and you won't return to the same spot. But if there is really magic preventing them from doing this, at least explore it and make it interesting. This then leads on to my next gripe, with how people are finding each other when there's a whole Middle-earth to explore. The chances of this are so slim. At any point, people could be 100 miles in any direction at any place, but everyone just seems to have Apple Air tags on them, so they magically arrive at the perfect point and not overshoot people going long past where they're at. It just is so precise, it makes absolutely no sense if you really look at it. The next thing it then steals from Season 8 is people conveniently forgetting major plot points. Just like forgetting the Iron Fleet, the elves forgot Galadriel could be killed if they attacked Adar's forces, but unfortunately for them, so does he. The water forgot to behave like water, and well, the blind queen just miraculously happens to get to where she needs to be at the exact time. With the new king guy forgetting he could have prevented that at all from happening by just having some guards posted along the path. Characters are also conveniently forgetting to travel in appropriately sized groups for the mission they're undertaking and the foes that they know they'll be taking on. For example, you wouldn't have two people go with you to find someone that's been taken. You'd likely want to be in a group bigger than that. And you also wouldn't go in a group of like 5 people to get to Celebrimbor with an important message if you've not heard anything back, because that signals a huge problem, that there's something stopping them from doing so. And just 5 miners also go down to confront Disa and her husband. You'd expect there to be far more than that. I know they state there are very few miners in the entire kingdom, but you can't be telling me a few did all of this. They are just trying to cover up for the fact that they have wasted money on pointless things that they cannot afford more extras. It's not like the show feels like the money was put towards the costumes or the set design. Remember in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, they crafted the armour to not only look good, but it was functional and provided protection. In Rings of Power, however, this elf, I still don't remember his name, quite forgettable, is wearing wood armour. I'm no historian or combat expert, but wouldn't that be the most ineffective at protecting him? As it could rot, it could cause objects to become lodged, allowing them to throw him around, and well, it's not particularly thick, so couldn't it be easily broken? Most impressively, the Númenóreans still have these flimsy breastplates. It's not going to protect you from anyone. This all accompanies some questionable action scenes. I'm also just not sure why the orcs aren't really terrifying. Something about them doesn't reach the Lord of the Rings level terror. Maybe it's that they are without the deformities that we see, or it just might simply come down to the digital cameras, which remove the grittiness from the actual frame. Or are they trying too hard to replicate what has been and not trying to be original in their depiction? I'm not surprised the armour looks cheap. Instead of putting money towards hiring experienced showrunners and writers, they put a majority of it towards the CGI. And this will always become a problem. For this will always push them to overuse CGI because it's available, which often cheapens its effect and adds to the feeling of a fake setting because they can just change the background whenever they want rather than relying on practical locations. The reason real locations are crucial is because people know how these places should feel and look but a studio shot location will always have a certain fake look if done wrong. Just look at Andor, a show that feels so raw and real compared to the glossy and dull shows from the same IP. You can tell the writers do not have a load of experience because they're constantly masquerading the most basic ideas through riddles and metaphors. It is used in almost every scene as they feel like their wisdom in their words are impactful, but they are just far from meaningful. It also makes characters more difficult to connect to than they already were because the dialogue is nonsensical and their points could be covered in a much more eloquent way that isn't just used to eat up runtime, boring the audience. The writers are also clamoring for the emotional moments like those in Lord of the Rings, by copying the moments you remember most, but only for it to feel stale as they do not realise why people cared in the first place. When Boromir was pierced by many arrows, we had seen his inner struggle, his motivations, but the eventual redemption arc that made his demise meaningful, whereas we barely meet this character, doing nothing to lay the groundworks, so we don't care as it's only surface level tragedy, so we are without the emotional connection making it feel hollow. This happens multiple other times, where they try to copy what came before, and then continually forgetting what made it such a powerful moment in the first place. This is also followed by trying to humanise the orcs, those we are meant to be against, hence detracting any care we have for the characters, as there is no true evil we can root against, as they have previously informed us in earlier scenes that we should not hate the orcs, so instead working against them as we then don't have a definitive side to pick. This is in addition to trying to justify atrocities, which, in the recent light of Hollywood's haunted past, makes me think this is so we don't actually see the actual people making this content as bad. A crime that is most unforgivable is the lightsaber effect, pioneered by Disney, where characters should sustain life-ending injuries but miraculously live through plot conveniences and to surprise the audience. The reason something like Game of Thrones was so shocking in a good way is that George understood the effect of a wound. When Robert got injured, it led to his demise, which felt organic and grounded the show. But then we have people walking off being slammed into walls, falling from skyscraper level heights, and getting mortally wounded. Even the smaller details such as character emotions are lost because the actors don't realise how much power the eyes have in telling us what they feel. It seems to be a lost art amongst these new actors, or an art that isn't even taught. Maybe even one that's becoming impossible, with the restrictions placed on the face by the cosmetic procedures that they get done. Sorry, that's shade for another show. The thing that disappointed me the most was how poorly they tried to make a good, well-organised battle. I always love action scenes, but this was poisonous to my sanity. So I'm going to dedicate a bit more time to this. The first is that they had fires at night, which would have been visible from the city, so the elves would have known the orcs were on their way, rather than being surprised. Then, the catapults that they were using had variable distances and strengths that was inconsistent throughout. A few examples of this would be the damage it did to the structures in the city. It even hit the mountain peaks, but struggled to dent the walls or come close to them. This would have rendered the siege machine that they had useless, and would have been more logical to abuse this power to then have their troops storm the city with much more ease. So, after spending a long time just bombarding them and damming the river, yes, they did that, which was rather stupid and doesn't actually make sense when you look at it on a deeper level. Other people have already covered this quite well, like the Drinker. They then attempted to storm the walls. Instead of using large amounts of ladders to get over the wall like in Helm's Deep, they maybe used 2 or 3. It's hard to tell because they didn't really put much emphasis on it. I can imagine they asked J.J. Abrams, hey, how do I copy this, but try hide it? And to the best of their ability, they tried. They also established the number of the orcs are large, and so throwing bodies at them would eventually take you a city. But I guess they're still not using their brains at this point. So this explains why the elves arrived, revealing themselves and warning the orcs of their charge, because everything else in this episode did not make sense from a logical standpoint. And so why would they use logic? The orcs then reacted to this in a comical way, where they organised themselves in a long line with no plan other than, see, we have Galadriel, we'll kill her if you charge us, hoping everyone is watching and listening to Elrond, or she's dead. Luckily for them, they merely managed to stop in time. Then they drag this out by having them go to bargain with Adar, which I mentioned earlier, which is stupid. With no agreement made, they go back and begin their fight again. Remember when they were literally going to kill Galadriel because they were going to fight them? What's the point if you're not going to kill her when they do begin their actual fight again? And this would do everyone a favour if she just died at this point. He previously used her to force them into this position, and with her no longer being useful, why keep her alive? The battle is a whole mess in itself, with pointless moments being made grand despite them achieving nothing in those moments. They even called back to when Gandalf arrived with the reinforcements, only to then pull like an Uno reverse card and try to be witty, and not have them turn up because whilst the battle's going on, the king is taking on a whole army. One guy dealing with a whole army. Wow. This could be simply resolved using crossbows and just take him out at this point because he clearly has gone mad and needs to be stopped. Or just trap him with shields, I guess, because it's just one guy. Even if he is slightly more powerful because of the ring, which I've heard doesn't actually make sense because they didn't do that in the actual story. Yeah, they're just running out of ideas at this point. Remember when they hinted at the troll being part of the orcs army and it didn't add up to anything? It was just wasted time that could have been spent elsewhere where they could have pushed the story forward. It was just the most anticlimactic moment of the entire episode. And I guess it's just a common theme at this point. Then this guy experiences a mortal injury and just so happens in the next episode to be perfectly fine. I just can't be bothered to spend any more time on this episode. It doesn't make sense. Really, everyone who actually has a functioning brain would understand that this battle is just nonsensical. And so after all of this, what about the lore, you may be asking? I'm not going to pretend I've read the books and have a deep understanding of it. Instead, I would suggest you watch someone like Nerderotic, as he would be much more comprehensive on that front and have a much more detailed understanding. But I've heard it's rough. It makes no attempt to honour it at all. But in a positive light, the Ents looked great. Thanks for watching. Do you hope there's a season 3? Because I sure as hell do. Because it means they've wasted more money.